Welcome to Al Bernstein Unplugged Unboxing. In a 40-year Hall of Fame career, Al has chronicled some of the greatest moments in boxing history. On this podcast, you get to hear him expand on those memories and talk about the current news in the sport of boxing. You also hear Al interview some of the biggest names in the sport. Here's Al Bernstein Unplugged.
Hi, everybody, and welcome. This is our first new episode of 2021. And I'm delighted that we're back again doing this podcast. 2020 provided us with a great platform to begin this show. Certainly 2020 was a challenging year in so many respects, but the one bright spot for me was that this show began, and it's been a joy to do. And a big part of that is because my partner, Trip Mitchell, does it with me. Trip, how are you?
I am great, and boxing had an amazing last 6 months, and all of a sudden it started off very quick with a Garcia fight. You've got some fights coming up on Showtime. It's got to be pretty great to get out of the gate like this.
Yeah, the year did start out well with Ryan Garcia and Luke Campbell, and a pretty good card overall on that. And then, of course, as you mentioned, on January 23rd, we're going to have on Showtime Angela Leo and Stephen Fulton Jr. On the top of what should be a very good triple header with a couple of other extra good fights as well. And so boxing has, in fact, got off to a decent start, and there are a lot of good fights already booked, and of course many more will continue. So trying to keep some of the momentum that boxing started to build up when it came back. And I should mention also, by the way, that on this show, we're going to be, I'll be talking to Christy Martin, the Hall of Famer, who is, of course, one of the most iconic women boxers of all time. We're going to talk to her about her career and also about her dramatic personal story, which is a harrowing one, and one that, luckily for all concerned, ended up on the right side of things with her now living a good and fruitful life, and in fact working as a boxing promoter. So we'll be able to talk to her. And we also, of course, get your questions at Al Bernstein on Twitter. And so we got a couple of those too.
Okay, first question coming from BXR. How does Tyson Fury do against the previous heavyweight greats that you saw live?
It's really an interesting question. You know, one of the things you have to take into account in comparing today's heavyweights to the ones from the past is the clear size differential. Now, size doesn't mean everything, but because of the height and reach and the physical attributes that a number of the heavyweights have now, it makes them sometimes a tougher matchup for fighters that may have been more skillful, but just are smaller and would have disadvantages. Perfect example is if Tyson Fury fought Joe Frazier. I think Joe Frazier is a brilliant fighter and one of the great heavyweights of all time. But clearly, he's at a disadvantage because he'd be giving away inches and inches in height and reach against Tyson Fury. And Tyson Fury has shown a really good chin, at least, and because Deontay Wilder is certainly a great puncher and would be a great puncher in any era, and Tyson Fury astonishingly got up from the knockdown that he suffered there and took some of Deontay Wilder's best punches. So when we juxtapose how he would do against fighters from the past, the one fighter I know he would not do well against is Lennox Lewis, who brings that same height and reach for the most part to the dance and a lot of power. And I think that would be a very tough fight for Tyson Fury. But some of the smaller heavyweight champions of the past, I think Tyson Fury would have a good chance to beat. George Foreman would be a tough matchup for him because he had just enough height, and the latter day George Foreman had a terrific jab and he had an amazing chin. And so he and Tyson Fury would be a fascinating matchup to be sure. And the really smaller heavyweights like the Rocky Marcianos of the world, if you want to go all the way back, they'd have a problem with Fury because of that height and reach, and it would be difficult for them. So it's kind of a mixed bag for him. But there are heavyweights from the past that, because of his sheer size, I think he would do better against.
So when Tyson came along and he was so much smaller, how did he do so well inside? What was his key to
Well,
victory?
I mean, Tyson was a more diminutive in terms of height, and he did fight bigger fighters. He fought 6'5" guys, 6'6" guys, and maybe Tyson is a good one to talk about with Fury too, because Tyson in his prime would not be an easy man for Tyson Fury to face, that's for sure. And some people would think that Mike Tyson would be the winner in that fight, and he might, because we've seen other fighters like Cunningham put Fury down, and the theory is that Mike Tyson's power might keep him down. Though again, Deontay Wilder was a big puncher, but Mike Tyson against the bigger fighters would jab his way in, get on the inside, and then he would work those great combinations to the body and the head.
Okay. And our second question is kind of an interesting question from a broadcast standpoint. Donovan Casp asks, how much studying do you do on a particular fighter leading up to the broadcast of a fight? Do you watch several of their fights or just highlights? Do you have your own notes, or are you like Farhood and just know or remember everything?
Well, Steve Farhood, my colleague at Showtime, who does the ShowBox series and also works with us on Showtime Championship Boxing, doing the scoring and also historical notes and features. And Steve, by the way, helps with all of us with our preparation for the Showtime Championship Boxing show. So that's part of the answer to that question. And by the way, I can't do what Steve Farhood does. I'm not as smart as him, so I can't remember everything like he does. The other person that I've worked with over the years who had a photographic memory, who could come to ringside with virtually no notes and remember everything, was Dave Bontempo. Dave is amazing. He just remembers everything. For me, the way we prepare, it's twofold. One, of course, you look at as much video as you can. Whatever's available of fighters, you want to look at it. And if it's on YouTube, or we have a fight that's not on YouTube, but we get a link to it, the idea is to watch as much video as you can. And I really have to watch it because I have to do the Keys to Victory, which requires that you watch it and try to find out what you think the fighters will do. Then we have a series of notes. We have John Brister does for us a big package of notes. We get notes from the CompuBox people who talk to us about how many punches have been thrown in different fights, and who uses a jab more times than a round, etc. So we have those notes. Steve Farhood provides us with certain notes, and then I, on my own, we'll start Googling and looking through records and different interviews that the fighters have done, whether it's on YouTube or it's a digital, just an interview they've done with a writer. So the idea is to take as much information as you can, and we have tons of it. We are well taken care of in that regard. And then the final piece of the puzzle is we interview each fighter. We have a fighter meeting in which we can interview them. So that way, after we've looked at all this material, we can ask them their thoughts on something. So we have a plethora of information, and any boxing broadcaster working for us or for a major TV network that doesn't go into a fight with all the proper information, that's on them, because it's all available. You just have to utilize it, and the amount of material you yourself have to unearth is really very little, but still you want to do that if you can, and I certainly try and do it as much as is humanly possible. So it's, preparation is, they say for every hour you're on the air, you need to do 2 hours of preparation, and that's probably an understatement, I think, of the process. Well, somebody that was prepared when she walked into the ring was Christy Martin, who was a professional champion who started out in tough woman contests, and graduated to professional boxing, of course, and had a 49-7-3 record in her long and illustrious career, and it landed her into the Hall of Fame. which she will be inducted into this coming year when they have the inductions for both 2020 and 2021. And she was a pioneer in women's boxing and certainly helped pave the way for some of the great stars of women boxing that we have now. And we had a chance to get her to do an interview with me. And here's my chat with Christy Martin. Christy, first of all, I'm delighted that you had a chance to join us today. I've been looking forward to getting a chance to chat with you after all the years of covering your matches and knowing you through all the years. And it's a journey that goes back, to the 1980s, before you became known as a well-known boxer. When you were getting involved in the sport, I know I've read a lot about how difficult that period was for you. How hard was it at that time when women's boxing was, really getting in the pioneering stages? How hard was it for you to get fights, to just be involved in the sport?
These ladies that are in boxing now can only imagine what it was like for me back in the late 80s, early 90s. We had no tape on fighters. We didn't know if they had fought. A lot of my opponents had been in kickboxing before,
right.
Or maybe they did some form of karate or something. You had no idea. It was just, you got what you got when you got in the ring. So unlike today where you study tapes and all this and that, my whole thing, and I did keep this philosophy throughout my career, I had to worry about what I was going to do and let them worry about stopping what my plan was. And that came from early on, not having the tapes and not knowing what I was getting fight night.
And it had to be hard just to literally get a fight. I mean, I'm sure getting on cards was difficult because in many cases they didn't know who to go find for an opponent. And what do you do?
Absolutely. I mean, first of all, they don't want to put a woman on a fight card.
Right. Yeah. They weren't too keen on having you in the first place, right?
Right. Absolutely. They didn't want me on the first place. So, you cross over that hurdle and then, okay, now we have to find an opponent. And then, what if that opponent week of the fight falls out? Then where do you go? And that's still the problem today that I have with putting women on my fight cards. And then, replacing an opponent at the last minute is very tough. But it was so hard for me to fight that even in the early 90s, my mother promoted a show in Princeton, West Virginia, so I could have a fight.
That's amazing.
Wow. Goodness, it started to heat up after that.
Well, eventually you would get with one of the most prestigious promoters in the sport, Don King. How did that come about? How did you end up with a connection with Don King, and how was he able to see the potential in you as a boxing star?
I have no idea why he took the chance on me, to be honest. But my connection was Jesse Robinson, who was at the time was training heavyweight fighters for King. And Jesse was training a young heavyweight, Gerald Mitchell, in Daytona Beach, Florida. And Jesse came in and saw me sparring. And actually, I had long hair at the time, had it all up under my ear. And Jesse was like, "Who's that guy?" And the guys in the gym started laughing. And he was like, "What?" So he just started hanging around and showing up. And then he would tell me, "I'm going to take you to King. I'm going to take you to King." And of course, I'm like, Don King doesn't want a female fighter. But sure enough, one day he made a phone call to me. Jesse Robinson made a call and said, "King will see you." And I got in the car immediately. And at the time, I think his office was in Fort Lauderdale, right, and went down to South Florida to see King. Never knowing.
That's amazing. And you had a meeting with him, and he obviously got on board with it. Did you feel at the beginning, right from the beginning, that he was going to remain committed to it, because he did with you?
I feel like that King treated me just like a fighter. Like I didn't get special. Yeah. I don't feel like I got special treatment. Maybe somebody on the outside would say, "Oh, you're getting special treatment. You just didn't realize it." But I think he put me out there, and it was kind of like, sink or swim. You're on your own, Christy. I'm going to give you this opportunity, but you have to be ready and make sure that you can take advantage and make the most of this opportunity.
Well, one of the turning points of your career, and I think you can make an argument for how people were kind of perceiving women's boxing, was your fight with Deidre Gogarty, which was an amazing match. And I urge anyone, if they can find it on YouTube or wherever, to go take a look at it, because it really was pretty extraordinary. you guys got a standing ovation from the crowd after the fight. And it was, I think, something that kind of put you on the map and made people understand, even more so, and made people understand that women's boxing could be very entertaining.
Absolutely. I mean, to me, that was the fight that put women's boxing out there. We were, fortunate enough that Mike Tyson was there, but we fought like 2 fights before Tyson. So,
Yeah.
just about the time people were starting to get in their seats and get settled in to watch the fight, it was us. And I've heard so many stories from people say that they were pushing each other, or the guys in the green room back in the back were all like walking to the back, and they didn't want to watch 2 women fight. And then as the fight heated up, all of a sudden, they're like elbowing the women out of the way. They want to get back to the front of the room so they can see the fight. So, actually after that fight, I went to my hotel room, and my room phone was full of messages. And it was full of messages from people like the J Show, the morning shows, and all these like really famous stuff. And I almost started crying. I was like, why could somebody be so mean to me and make all these pranks? And so like my PR guy from Showtime at the time, and he's like, Christy, it's not a joke. You need to get down here. You wouldn't believe, you are the buzz at the MGM Grand. It's not, they're not talking about Tyson. They're talking about you guys and how awesome a fight you put on.
Pretty amazing. You thought they were prank calls. Now, as I think one might expect, for sure. So you were having this excellent career, but the darker side of things was that through the years, your husband, James Martin, who was very much a part of all this and a dominant figure in many respects, was creating a different alternative, a different universe for you that wasn't as pleasant as the success you were having in boxing. And finally, on November 23rd, 2010, your life would change dramatically on every level when he attacked you and stabbed you multiple times, shot you, and literally left you for dead. Obviously, an extraordinarily awful experience. Did you think at the time when it happened you were going to even make it through?
As I went back that day, and Jim had been telling me for 20 years, if ever I left him, that he would kill me. And when I went back home that day, I knew that that's what was going to happen. He was going to kill me. But I was to that point in my life that, number one, it really didn't matter. I was that low. It didn't matter to me if I lived or died. And basically I was ready to die. So, but also I was never going to be that person that lived looking over my shoulder the entire time, waiting for him to attack me or shoot me or kill me or whatever. I just couldn't be that person. In my mind, I had to go that day back to my house and either live through or die with whatever he had to give out. And that's what happened. I mean, by the grace of God, somewhere during the middle of the attack, and the attack actually lasted about 45 minutes, the switch flipped. And instead of not caring if I lived or died, no, I told him in very blunt words, you can't kill me. And I meant it as much as I meant that, as much as the sun came up this morning, I meant you cannot kill me. And that's just the way I felt. And as I said, by the grace of God, I'm still here. And I feel that God left me here to help other people that are in the same kind of circumstances that I was in for so long.
Well, it is extraordinary story, and the genesis of why he brutally attacked you was something that you had been wrestling with. You were coming out, and you were going to marry another woman, Lisa, and you were leaving him for her, and you had thoughts at that time. You were still an active fighter involved in boxing, and even after that, you had thoughts in your mind: can I come out, and will my life continue? And once you got past the trauma and survived, and he got put in jail, you were left with the idea that, does coming out for me, what does it do? How does the public look at me? How was that difficult for you to wrestle with after you got past all this trauma?
Well, to sneak out of the closet, I clearly broke, boom, bust the door down, and here I am. But the thing is with Jim, I really didn't leave him for a woman, and I just left him. And
Yeah.
then Lisa
Okay.
and we fought each other in '01, and then we reconnected, and well, we had always been friendly with each other. Then we
So
got married
her
in
relationship really came after, because it's been more reported that it was the genesis of that. So that came afterwards, huh?
right. No, and so yeah, it was just leaving him, and but at the same time, all those years he had told me how the boxing world hated me anyway. But if they find out that you're gay, they're gonna really hate you,
Okay.
and not just the boxing world, your family and your friend, everybody. And so I just stayed. I stayed married to boxing. And then finally, I was just to the point of I really wasn't married to boxing anymore because I was cheating on boxing with drugs. And I just, you know what? I'm just going to be me and live and let people, they're either going to be on board or they're going to not. And so I have to say that I have had great support from the boxing community since the shooting and stabbing. And I mean, I don't know what people might be saying behind my back, but to me, they're probably more friendly now than they were before, because all I hear is Jim was such an ass and we hated him. And I'm like, why didn't, if more people would have spoken out and told me that, maybe I would have moved sooner, but he was going to try to kill me no matter what.
Well, I mean, it's the whole episode and story about it is just a traumatic one, and you ended up changing your life for the better, which is extraordinary. And something that most people would find astonishing is, am I correct? 5 or 6 months after that attack, you were back in the ring?
Yes, sir. I was actually scheduled to fight 3 months later. I was supposed to fight on the it was Cotto and Mayorga. I was supposed to fight on that pay-per-view show, and that was in March after being shot in late November. But Miguel Diaz was training me at the time. I was in Vegas and sparring with a young amateur kid. And Miguel really wanted to get at me because he wanted to make sure I was okay mentally, and not thinking that the rib that Jim had shot me through was maybe still damaged. And he hit me on the rib, broke the rib too. And so it knocked me out of that big opportunity to fight on pay-per-view. I ended up fighting on Chavez Jr. show. So yeah, it was like 6 or 7 months later. I still ended up fighting, but fighting on Chavez Jr. after seeing him, I fought on seniors cards with Junior coming in on Buffalo's shoulders when he was probably 6 or 7 years old. I'm like, wow, maybe I've stayed around a little too long.
That was a tip off to you, perhaps. Well, you were, as you said, you hardly gave up on boxing, and you are now promoting boxing, and not just promoting. You've been doing shows on a regular basis, and I know you have one coming up that's really important to you for a number of different reasons, not just as a promoter, but also in terms of what it entails. Tell us about your coming event.
Right. We actually have a show. Let me give them all a little plug, and then we're going to talk about the important one.
Okay, you got
they're all
some before
important.
the April one. Okay, good.
Yes, January 30th, we're going to be in Myrtle, and that'll be my first time to Myrtle Beach. But I have a lot of West Virginians, a lot of people excited about coming to Myrtle Beach. My main event is Victor's, a kid I just signed, and it's his hometown. So, it's exciting for him to be able to fight in front of his hometown fans and family, friends, and then we're going to come February 12th, be my first time back to Orlando, Florida. So I'm excited about that. I have Richard Rivera, Popeye. He's like 18-0, cruiserweight. He's a good fighter, a great guy. I love him, and he understands marketing. The fight that I really am excited about is April 10th here in Vero Beach. We're doing a black tie affair for domestic violence awareness, where it's fundraising, and we're only going to do about 4 or 5 fights. They'll be, very competitive, good fights, but we're also going to have a little memorabilia auction. We're going to have a couple people come in and speak that between fights, so they're only going to talk maybe 3 to 5 minutes, but just to make it an event and make it an event that people want to come to the next year, and just to bring more to domestic violence. And as I tell everybody, my whole thing is domestic violence isn't always about bruises. If I would have had bruises and black eyes and cuts and things, I could have gone to my dad and said, look what's happening to me. I could, but because Jim's abuse was more emotional and mental and control, it's harder to explain, and it's harder for someone that hasn't been in that situation to understand it. Because an example is every time something good happened. I mean, I'm on the cover of Sports Illustrated. I'm so excited, and Jim wants to just like bust my bubble and tell me how it's because of him. I mean, no, it wasn't because of him. It was because Deirdre Gogarty and I had a hell of a fight. That's why I was on the cover of Sports Illustrated. And in anything and the reason I was with Don King was all about Jim Martin, and after a while, after you hear that for so long, you start believing it. And that's where I was. I believed him. I believed him that it wasn't about me. It was about him, and that no one liked me, and that I really wasn't all that. Not that I think I'm all that, but
right.
I think I can fight a little bit. I think I have some pretty good skills. Really beat me down. And that's a whole nother thing of domestic violence that people don't understand.
Do you think that's a part of it that, and you're saying to raise awareness that there are many women who suffer that kind of domestic violence, and it's a little harder for people to get the gist of it?
Absolutely. I mean, with the whole control and the emotional beat down, financially, how many
Right.
women
That's a good
maybe
point.
if they
That's
do work,
part.
much money, and so they're held there. They're held there because they don't make the money. Which you can look at in my situation and say that even made my situation even more crazy. I was the one making the money,
Right.
and I stayed with the abuse. And hopefully, by sharing my story and just bringing more awareness to different forms of domestic violence, that I'll save somebody.
So they can go on your website for your fights and get information about that April fight and all your other boxing matches as well. And the money raised from that, of course, will go to a great cause. As a promoter, first of all, what led you to the idea that was the part of the sport that you would most want to be involved in? What was it that drove you to even put that hat on?
I'm not sure that I ever really decided I wanted to do that, but I actually had a stroke after that fight. I was talking about on the undercard of Chavez Jr. I broke my hand in 9 places. They put me to sleep, and during the surgery, I had a stroke. So me being hard-headed and thinking like a fighter, I thought I could come back and have another fight and get that 50th win. And who else would be a perfect opponent but Mia? And
yeah.
when I lost to Mia, and I'm sorry, Mia, but when I lost to Mia St. John, I knew I was done. Boxing was finished for me. And the minute that the final bell rang, I took the microphone from the ring announcer and said, "That's it. You've seen the last that you'll ever see Christy Martin in the ring again." So training, I tried to train a couple fighters. They don't want to work as hard as I think you should work. They don't have the dedication. Fighters across the board. And then especially when you're talking about low-level fighters, they just don't get it. They don't know the hard work you have to put in. So I thought the next step is to be a promoter. And again, even with being a promoter, I feel like I started out as a 4-round promoter, like I did 4-round fighter. I'm up to maybe, I think I'm about to hit 8-round. I think 2021 is going to be a great year. And, maybe we're going to have some, we've been streaming all the shows. I'm getting closer and closer to signing a good fighter. I have a couple guys on my roster, and we're going to get that one. It's going to make a break for us.
All right. Well, as you point out, you have to put the work in to figure out, how to do it. And you are now, as a woman who helped pioneer the sport, looking at women's boxing, and women's MMA made some amazing strides, and I think the success of that has started to trickle into women's boxing in some regards. Do you see progress being made in how women's boxing is getting more platforms and getting a little bit more support?
I think women's boxing is getting a little more support. I don't see, I haven't seen like great leaps and bounds since my career. But I think it's getting more opportunities. There's more women getting opportunities. I have to say, Dana White back in the 90s during my career, I would never use a woman. I would never put a woman fighter out there. And Ronda Rousey, the biggest star that he had at one time, and really, in my opinion, is the one that turned him around and onto using women MMA fighters. But they're doing great over there with the MMA. And I wish I think we need that personality in women's boxing. It's not just about, as it's not just about how good you fight. You have to be able to market yourself, connect with the fans, and they have to want to see you fight. And I think we're still trying to find that. Maybe it's Katie Taylor. I don't think we've seen her enough. But so far, that's what we're missing for women's boxing.
Yeah, and next week, in fact, on our next show, I'm going to have Amanda Serrano on, who's the fine champion, and we're hoping that she and Katie Taylor will hook up at some point. They were very close to making that fight before, and that would be a match certainly that would be of interest to people. You must feel some sense of pride, though, when there are times when we've seen some women's boxing that has taken center stage. And when you see it, I imagine you get a certain feeling like, hey, I played a hand in that happening.
I think so. If they could just send me like 10% of their check, it would be really nice. But I can't convince anybody they should do that. But no, I think we kicked down some doors and made it a lot easier for this next generation, or this generation that's out there now of women fighters, to be more accepted and to have better opportunities. So yeah, of course. Actually, the boxing writers named the Women Fighter Award Christy Martin Female Fighter of the Year award, and I got to go to the first dinner, and I was like, oh, this is so touching, because most people don't get an award named after them until they me to actually be able to go there and give the award away.
And you and I would be remiss without congratulating you for being a Hall of Famer now. You are now a Hall of Famer, which is extremely impressive, and congratulations for that.
That's very exciting. I mean, way back in the day, 1996, I was the Grand Marshal for the parade, but that was, the fight with the Gogarty fight had happened in March. And then the Hall of Fame, of course, always happens in June. So I was invited to come to the Hall of Fame and to be the Grand Marshals. Honestly, at first I said, no, I don't want to do it, because I was so intimidated by those guys. But I'm so glad I did. And I got the opportunity to meet guys like Carmen Basilio, Willie Pep, Archie Moore. I mean, of course, Frazier and Hagler and Hearns and all those guys. That's something that, money can't buy that. Doesn't matter. You can't buy those experiences.
No, that's for sure. Well, I wish you the very best in your promoting endeavors. People go online. We have your website up there, and they can go on and check out the matches you have upcoming. Obviously, 2021, with hopefully we'll be getting past the restrictions of the pandemic, and hopefully people will start getting healthy enough for us to do that. And that will help for your endeavor as well as everybody else's. And wish you the best in this new occupation of yours. And anything I can do, I want to be supportive of it. And I really appreciate you coming on board for the show.
Thank you so much. And I'm sure I'll see you ringside here in the near future.
Absolutely. Take care, Christy. So it was an interesting conversation, to say the least, with Christy Martin. And even just hearing her revisit all the harrowing experiences she went through, suffering, a murder attempt by her husband, was fairly dramatic, even now, hearing her talk about it.
It's amazing. And she is such a great interview. She does not hide anything. When you're talking to her, it is there's no emotion left unturned.
No, she tells you, and some of it she says kind of matter-of-factly in a certain way, but she is open about about her life and what has transpired. And the good news is that she came out the other side of it now, as we talked about, is has a good and fruitful life that includes her doing the boxing promotions. We get your questions on Twitter at Al Bernstein. We want you to keep sending them. And we got a couple more to answer, don't we?
We do. Kevin McTeague asks, how does Ryan Garcia match up against Davis, Haney, and Lopez in an amazing division?
Yeah, that's an interesting question. You know, Ryan Garcia, of course, with that win over Luke Campbell, in which he got up off the mat to win the fight and to knock out Luke Campbell, to stop him with a body shot that was resounding and made some people think of the body shot that Bernard Hopkins landed that knocked out Ryan Garcia's promoter, Oscar De La Hoya, some years ago, which is ironic. And, you know, Ryan Garcia at age 22 showed us a lot in that fight. He showed us poise and grit against a very good fighter in Luke Campbell, a fighter who is like, you know, a notch down from the top 4 or 5 lightweights, but a very good fighter who went the distance with Lomachenko and Jorge Linares, 2 terrific lightweights. And we did find things out about Ryan Garcia, but we know that at age 22, he's still a little bit of a work in progress. And the question is, can he immediately jump in against those men that were mentioned in the question? He is the mandatory challenger now, or one of 2 mandatory challengers, to Devin Haney, who is also a young fighter, who, by the way, also is somewhat untested against A-level opponents, though he has a title. And so the question is, can Ryan Garcia, the power puncher, deal with Devin Haney, the very slick boxer? Certainly, the fast hands of Devin Haney and the combination punching will be an issue for Garcia, and he's going to have to walk down Devin Haney, and he's going to have to cut the ring off on him. And the question is, will Devin Haney be able to deal with the kind of one-punch power that Ryan Garcia has? We may get to see that fight in 2021, and I hope we do. It would be, I think, a very interesting matchup. As to the other main lightweights, Gervonta Davis and Teofimo Lopez, they bring a different challenge to Garcia because they, too, are big, powerful punchers. We know that Davis is a superb puncher. We just saw him get a knockout of the year against Leo Santa Cruz, albeit a Leo Santa Cruz who's moving up in weight. But still, we've seen Gervonta Davis's power at 130, and we believe it will translate at 135, even against other 135-pounders. That remains to be seen, but he can punch. We know that Teofimo Lopez can punch well at 135. He knocked out Richard Comey, who was a top lightweight, and showed power in spots against Vasily Lomachenko, who, of course, also was stepping up to 135. So Lopez and Gervonta Davis present a different challenge for Garcia. Garcia was knocked down by Luke Campbell. He did get up, but Luke Campbell is certainly not the power puncher that Teofimo Lopez is, or even Gervonta Davis. And so my inclination is that the right step for him, if he's going to fight one of those men in 2021, I think Devin Haney's probably the right one. And we'll find out. We'll get to find out where he fits in to the upper echelon of the lightweight division.
And the lightweight division, Garcia, a lot of people talk about him being the next super charismatic fighter to come out. And he's surrounded by some great talent in the lightweight division. Could that division be the welterweights of the 1980s potentially?
Yeah, you know, all of those fighters, Devin Haney, Teofimo Lopez certainly, Gervonta Davis certainly, and Garcia, they all bring, I think, something special to the dance. And all of them have, pretty dynamic, for the most part, dynamic personalities, and they're also, exciting in the ring. So I think that division has the potential to be a very, very special one.
Okay, and our next question, and I'm going to start this off. This question is from Blair Tobin, and it's about the Hagler-Hearns fight, and he talks about watching it from a pay-per-view closed circuit venue, and I watched it in Salt Lake City, sitting behind Mark Eaton, the Utah Jazz center, who was 7'4"
Did you get
and
to
weighed
see
280
anything?
pounds. I didn't see a lot of it,
No,
but
I
Blair's
wouldn't think
question,
so.
how electric was it sitting ringside and calling Hagler Hearns? I watched it at a closed circuit venue, and it was a huge buzz that was in the air.
Well, without Mark Eaton in front of me, I had a little better chance to see the fight than you did. And it was pretty remarkable. You know, that fight came only 5 years into my broadcasting career. I started in 1980 at ESPN, and I had done the Hagler-Duran fight, Roberto Duran, a couple years before, which was amazing. That was only 3 years into my time as a broadcaster, and this was 5 years in. And so here I was at a fight that felt even more electric than the Duran-Hagler fight. And the Duran-Hagler fight was pretty important fight. And outdoors at Caesar's Palace in their outdoor venue, the setting was amazing. Clearly both these fighters were, you know, at the top of their game. And I, on top of all that, on the broadcast, I was working with Kurt Gowdy as the host and Al Michaels as my play-by-play partner. So that was pretty amazing. I felt like I was working with kind of, you know, broadcasting royalty. And it was an extraordinary night. And on that night, when they did the walk-ins, when they both got into the ring, for just a moment, I took my headsets off. And I just looked around to get the feel of the moment. And how extraordinary it was. And since then, I have done the exact same thing at every single fight I have broadcast, because I want to get that moment. I want to drink that in, understand how lucky I am to be sitting there and doing it, and just feel the moment. And it started, you know, at that fight. And of course, what ensued in that match was so dramatic and so exciting that it created certainly one of the most exciting nights that I've had in my 40-year career. And it's a night that I will never, ever forget for sure. Well, we have a chance.
We want to certainly talk about Tom Yankello.
Yeah, we do want to talk about Tom. Yeah, Tom Yankello, who in his World Class Boxing channel, which is a terrific channel that you guys get to see, not only videos that talk about the how-to of boxing for young amateur boxers, but also, you know, some of what he puts out there gives you tips and hints about how famous boxers go about their business and what they utilize in the ring. And you can both learn about boxing and be entertained over at Tom Yankello's World Class Boxing channel. So head on over there when you get an opportunity on YouTube to see that. I was going to say that we're going to be privileged in our next show to talk to current day women's boxing champion Amanda Serrano, who is a terrific fighter, multiple time world champion, and a delightful person. And we're going to get a chance to visit with her about her career and the state of women's boxing right now, and male boxing as well. She has many opinions on the overall boxing scene. And we're going to get a chance to visit with her next time on Al Bernstein Unplugged. So, Trip, I'm happy that we got to start out with a new episode for 2021, and this should be a fine year.
It should. And I'm going to sneak in one more question, if you don't mind.
Okay, go ahead.
This is such a great question. Shay Simmons, if Crawford can't get his wish list of Spence or Pacquiao and ends up with Porter, would this be a one-sided fight, a KO win for his resume, and would it make an argument for being number one pound for pound?
Oh, interesting question. And in the question, it kind of presumes that in that scenario, Crawford would beat Sean Porter and do it convincingly, which is very much in question. And I'm not saying that he for sure thought it was going to happen, but he when he was theorizing, obviously in the question, he was, you know, saying it. How would that enhance Crawford. The actual doing of it would not be easy. And by the way, while we all want to see Errol Spence and Terrence Crawford fight, the Porter fight is my second choice above Manny Pacquiao. I think that Sean Porter is a handful for any welterweight in the world. And by the way, is capable of beating any welterweight in the world. And that includes both Spence and Crawford. His fight with Errol Spence was razor thin. Could have gone either way. He fought brilliantly in that fight. He would, in my opinion, be a true challenge to Terrence Crawford. And it would be very interesting to see how that fight played out. If Terrence Crawford were to beat Sean Porter, in my opinion, it would enhance him because Sean Porter would certainly be the best welterweight that Terrence Crawford has ever faced by a country mile. And so if he got a chance to fight him, and if Terrence Crawford beat Sean Porter in any way, shape, or form, whether it was a close win or it was a dramatic win, and if it was a dramatic win, that would certainly enhance his standing and his feelings about being the best pound for pound, and maybe and if that were true, the best welterweight, pending his fight with Errol Spence, it would be dramatic for Crawford. So yeah, I think a win over Sean Porter, if he got it, would be big. And as I say, the Sean Porter fight is my second favorite fight for Terrence Crawford after the Spence fight, which we're all hoping for in 2021. So we did get all the questions in, and good for you for making sure that I didn't skip somebody. That's your special talent, Trip. You got to keep me on the straight and narrow. Anyway, our thanks to Chris and everybody at Let's Do Something Productions for making this show possible. Thanks to you, Trip, for your fine work co-hosting. And we'll see you next time with our special guest, Amanda Serrano.